Hello, everyone. Good morning, and thanks for joining us for the fifth webinar of the B2B Future Forum. We will be talking about the real ROI of modern commerce and what 100 B2B leaders learned about TCO and flexibility. My name is Johanna. I'm a demand and lead generation manager here at Shopware and running this webinar series. But now I hand over to my colleague Adriana, who will be taking you through the webinar today. So welcome, Adriana.
Perfect. Thank you, Johanna. And lovely to have you all, like we said, and thank you for joining us this week after we had to postpone it. It's lovely to have you here. So a quick look at the agenda first and what we're going to be going through. So last year during our Shopware Community Day, we spoke about what we learned from 100 different leaders and some of the common themes that came up in modernizing your commerce. And today we're going to do a bit more of a B2B focus on that. So we'll start with what we learned, a little bit of a recap of the 5 learnings there. And then we'll talk about how to eliminate redundant tools, lower TCO, and stay agile, before giving a mention to Agentic commerce and AI, which is a very hot topic around the industry at the moment. And then just before we finish off, we'll leave you with a 4-step ROI checklist that you can take with you and a few actionable steps that you can start to take to modernizing your own commerce. When looking at how 100 different leaders use their commerce, there were 5 topics that consistently came up across all of them. So we looked at quite a wide variety of industries, of countries, of business scenarios, but these 5 themes kept coming up for all of them. So I'll briefly run through these now. One of those was having a personalized but simple workflow. So this is the ability to have different pricing conditions and privileges per your segments. And the way that our customers have used it are things like individual pricing and our customer specific pricing features. And this is really important. We'll touch on this again a little bit later, but personalization shows up a little bit differently in B2B commerce than it does in B2C commerce. And that's just something that to be aware of, because it's not so much about upsells and cross sells, but it's more about what your customers need, how are they working, what is their specific business model, and how can you make sure that you show up, that you provide exactly what they're looking for. One example of this was Veolia. So just to give you a practical view of how somebody has used this, and you can have a look at the full case study on our website a little bit later if you'd like to get into more detail. But Veolia created a customer portal, and that meant that their customers were able to access services 24/7. So the things that they were having to reach out to Veolia for, wait for a response time, that were quite repetitive and they were doing on a regular basis, was slowing down the team by responding to them, but also slowing down the customer and being able to reorder or to get the documents that they need that are regularly available. So with the customer portal, they were able to accelerate their internal processes and lighten the workload while still focusing on exceptional service. So by being able to provide the very regular and sometimes repetitive reorders, downloads, documents, things like that into a 24/7 accessible portal, really made a difference by letting their team then focus on the most valuable conversations, interactions with their customers, rather than just doing more of the admin and the functionality. And that was one way how personalization helped them, because it was looking at what their customers were trying to do and trying to make that even easier for them, trying to make that even more accessible for them. And then if we look at the next point, which is seamless integration. So this is things like having consistent data and operational efficiency. So making sure that, so we'll talk about architecture in a moment, but making sure that your architecture talks to each other. So everything that's connected, is there a two-way conversation? Are you able to change things in one place and have it communicate to the next? But having those seamless integrations were really important, we found, for our customers, in just making sure that they're consistent both internally and externally to what they're saying to their customers and how they're able to serve them. And like I said, this ties in a little bit with your architecture. So just considering whether your setup is ready to scale for the future, as well as just not just for today. So when you're considering your commerce system, when you're considering modernizing, you probably have today's requirements and you have today's needs and you have today's budget, but you do need to look a little bit further ahead. Like, is this system suitable for you only right now? And it might be a perfect fit right now, but is it going to be suitable when you're going to expand, you're going into new markets? And again, we will touch on that a little bit more later. But one example of this that you can also have a look at our website is Bayaref. That's always a difficult brand name to say, but they did a really good job of kind of centralizing their architecture and having architecture that supports that growth, because they've got a really huge product catalog of 200,000 products, and they needed to be able to serve 35 different instances in 28 different countries. So they needed a system that was going to be able to grow with them, because at the moment, I just mentioned seamless integrations. At the moment, they weren't really talking to each other. They weren't able to get a centralized overview of all of their global operations from the different countries, the different businesses, because they were using different ERP systems, different kinds of integrations, different things for their commerce. So it made a single global overview very difficult. But the way that they were able to centralize that by choosing the right architecture for them is that they could have those 35 different instances in the same single place. But they could also have them integrated with different ERP systems, different PIM systems for each of the different branches that needed different requirements while still having that centralized view. So that was a really good example of how they solved complexity. And then if we look at process automation, this was in the top two things that most commonly came up of what people were realistically doing in their operations when they were modernizing, when they were looking at how to make the most out of their commerce systems, how to be more efficient. One example of this, and I didn't bring it on screen this time, but we've got a customer, Thomas Phillips, which is quite a big furniture retailer here in Germany and throughout Europe. And they were, with their automation, they were able to save 80% of their internal workload, which is quite a huge amount of time. If you think about what your teams are working on, what could they do with an extra 80% of their time? What better customer conversations could they have? What more outbound could they do? And look for the right people and the right prospects. The way that they did this was things like ERP syncs, order automation, shipping logic, and dynamic workflows. So by being able to automate those things, they were able to focus more on, like I say, the more valuable conversations, and just relating it to what we know at Shopware and the things that they specifically use was the rule builder and the flow builder for us. And again, I mentioned that this is in the top two things that was most commonly mentioned by 100 different people, but the rule builder and flow builder comes up in almost every single conversation. And I think that just shows how important automation is. And it's maybe one of those quick wins that you can do as well in making your everyday life easier, making sure that you make a little bit of time away again from those repetitive, reoccurring daily, almost admin-like tasks, and into more valuable conversations with your customers. And then finally, customer centricity and having customer centricity by design. So this is something that, again, similar to automation, almost every single one of the 100 different customers we looked at mentioned as having an impact either on their cost or on their return on investment when choosing a commerce system. And that's kind of just asking yourself the question, similar to personalization, what are your customers looking for? So where can you show up for them? What are they looking for? What do they want to do? And it's not so much about what do you want them to do, it's what are they doing? What are they looking to do? And PMG is a really nice example of this because they really took that question of what are our customers doing straight into the heart of the design when they worked with their commerce system. So similar to Veolia, they also created a dealer portal, but this dealer portal was a little bit different. So PMG is a manufacturer and reseller of bicycles. So they work with dealers. So they needed their dealer portal to be able to set goals, credit limits, approvals, and provide support in the same place. So not having to have those everyday conversations with their dealers about the recurring questions, the recurring requests of, do you have this? Can we get this? Can we do anything on price for this? But actually making them more self-sufficient and bringing them exactly what they need to be able to work with the product easily and be able to see everything from their goals to their credit limits and be able to work with approvals on different levels of roles. So it was a really nice example. Of course, you can see the KPIs here. We've got over a 52% increase in orders and a 30% increase of session per users. So, which is a really positive indication that they found what their customers were looking for. They gave it to them, and they made that life a little bit easier for them. That's like a little recap of, like I mentioned, we spoke about this at SCD last year, and hopefully we'll be seeing some of you at the SCD this year in June as well. If you want to take a deeper look into the full presentation and the full details of those 5 lessons, we also mentioned a few more examples. The ones I mentioned here are specifically relevant for the B2B industry, but in last year's presentation, we also looked at some of the B2C examples, so you can take a look at that. We'll send you out a link after this webinar if you do want to see more. And then I'm just going to use an analogy of an iceberg here. So in this presentation, when we looked at our top 5 lessons, we talked a little bit about the hidden cost of total cost of ownership. So our focus for today, I think I would like to be the return on investment. But one of those things that I'll mention later is you do have to look at your cost as well as the money that you're bringing in. And the reason that I say your total cost of ownership is a little bit like an iceberg is because the things that you probably see, the things that you're looking for today, the things that you're comparing for are most likely the licensing fees. So that's what you're comparing between competitors. But similarly to how when you're considering your architecture for the future, you also need to consider the costs that are below. So below the iceberg, the things that maybe you don't see straight away is how that's going to impact you in the future. What's the maintenance like? What is the integration like? Is this going to grow with you in the next 5 years, in the 10 years, or are you going to have to change systems? So is this something that really feeds you a long-term total cost of ownership? And the licensing fees that you see today only represent about 15 to 20% of your total costs. And that's why it's really important to look below the surface of the iceberg, to use the analogy, at what it's going to look like in the future so that you're not missing any rising costs, you're not eating into your margins, you're not losing manpower to inefficient workarounds, so that you're considering kind of that long-term running cost, not just the monthly outgoing on the license fee. So take that with you. We'll come back to it in a couple of the other points that we make. But this is why we don't just talk about licensing fees, because your cost is much bigger than that. It is much more long-term than that. So if we move on to the next section, so your return on investment and how can you influence your return on investment. And this is usually in 2 different levels. Like I mentioned before, you can either improve your top line revenue, you can sell more, you can find new customers, you can try to increase your books, as in sell more. Or you can do lever 2, which is optimizing your operating costs. So of course, if you have more money coming in as well as less money going out, you're increasing your return on investment on your commerce platform. And we'll take a little bit more of a detailed look into the ROI now of what is considered into each of those. So Johanna, if you could join me on the next screen. Perfect. Thank you. So when you're looking at improving your top line revenue, some of the things that you might want to consider is conversion efficiency, market expansion, and payment flexibility. And then when you're looking at optimizing your operating costs, again, payment flexibility comes up, and we'll mention why there is an overlap in both of those, but you're also looking at licensing fees, implementation and maintenance, hosting, and extensions. Now, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, in B2B, personalization isn't exactly about upsells or cross-sells. It's more about reducing friction rather than adding inspiration, as you might do in B2C. And this is where things like your time to market is really important, because when you're choosing your commerce platform, one that makes expansion difficult could take you 9 to 12 months to implement. If your platform is already available and optimized for expansion, it's flexible, ready to grow with you, it could only take you 3 or 4 months. And that's a very clear ROI, a return on investment, because you're reducing the time that you have expenditure going out and the time that you're implementing, whilst also bringing forward the time that you have to sell. So this is why that's really important. So if we take a deeper look into lever one here, so how can you improve your top line revenue? How can you pull that first lever? So with conversion efficiency, like I say, personalization in B2B is more about reducing the friction. So you're looking at things like the contract pricing visibility, your customer specific catalogs, reorder flows, and like we mentioned earlier with PMG and with Veolia, role-based permissions. Can your customers set who is able to access what, who is able to do what at different levels? And having a frictionless checkout, and this goes a little bit into payment flexibility, but you'll see some overlap between both of the levers and the points on both of the levers, because the way that you can increase revenue with one of them might also have a positive impact on reducing your overall costs. But also in conversion efficiency, you might consider some innovation, some ways to display your product. Again, asking that questions, what are our customers expecting? What can we do to make it easy for them? And having a system, a commerce system that has something like spatial product view, 3D views, AR applications that can help you show what are often complex products in B2B more simply, more easily accessible to your customer without maybe having to send out a sample or very lengthy conversations about measurements. They can easily access that. It's part of their browsing journey. And again, you're making that conversion easy for them. You're being there where you're meeting them where they are rather than asking them to come to you. And then market expansion. So when you're looking to improve your top line revenue, you might look at new markets. And like I said, this is where your time to market is really important from your commerce platform. If you have a platform that is ready to expand with you, it's ready to grow with you, maybe you don't know what that growth looks like today, but you do need to consider all of the options when you are picking your commerce platform. Because when you choose the right architecture with the professional tools for this, you'll have the opportunity to activate in new countries and marketplaces at the click of a button. It could be as easy as that. And of course, some of the points that I've mentioned here is specifically about international growth, but of course, this applies also to having different brands and different storefronts. So the example that I mentioned earlier of Bayer Ref, the way that they were able to have 35 different instances and still have a single centralized view. Because some of your locations, maybe some of your customers, maybe your B2C needs a different view from your B2B. And the ability to be able to do that very quickly and be able to present both of those from a single central backend really reduces the time that it takes for you to activate, for you to make the most of a new opportunity. And we'll touch on AI innovation a little bit later as well. And I think the next webinar in our series is specifically about AI innovation. But this is another way that you can really utilize it to reduce your time to market. So AI innovation isn't always about finding something new and doing something that's never been done before. At the moment, just make the most of it. Make the most of how it can make your life easy and reduce your time to market. And then payment flexibility. So having flexibility of your payment options is one way to increase your revenue, because being able to have the major players available, but also being able to activate B2B specific payment methods is really important. So whether it's by country, whether it's having buy now, pay later options, this could be a really, again, an easy way to help your customers convert. One of the really interesting KPIs we have from one of our partners is that they found that poor payment routing can increase authorization failure by 3 to 7%. And if you're those are all chances for you to lose the customer. not chances, but those are all spaces where you could lose a customer. And if it's a new customer, they might not commit, they might not try again. But this is where your payment and having flexibility and having the right options that your customer is expecting is really important. And then I'll overlap from that into our lever 2, because we talk about payments here as well. So how does your payment system impact your operating costs? So like I said, being able to integrate with the providers that your customers expect will help you convert. But similar to extensions, being able to connect, integrate, and communicate between your commerce system and your payment system reduces the errors. It helps you plan for processing fees. It helps you be able to have more of an transparent look on how your systems are working together, making sure that they work seamlessly with each other as well, and that you're not spending manual time processing payments. It's all available exactly where your customers are. And then licensing fees. So if we think back to our iceberg, your licensing fees, of course, that's a monthly, a yearly, a quarterly expenditure for you. But what's really important is that you do look below the iceberg. So is that system going to cost you more beyond just your fees? Is it going to cost you more in the long term? Is it going to fit what you need today and tomorrow and in 10 years' time? So you can spend time negotiating a discount, but in the long run, what you need is flexibility with your software. It's a software that's going to grow with you. And I think this can apply to your whole tech stack as well. And then optimizing your costs with implementation and maintenance. So we talked a little bit about market expansion and how important it is for you to be able to have a quick time to market. But it's really good to know that 60 to 80% of your commerce sits outside of your license fees. So we talked about the iceberg, and this is where it becomes really measurable. So if most of your costs sit outside of your license fees, that's where you're looking at how long is the implementation going to take you? How difficult is it to do what you need to do? And then how difficult is it going to be for you to maintain it? Is there automation in place? Are things connected? Are your different integrations available so that you're not having to change every time you want to change a price, you've got to change it in 3 different locations? So is the maintenance of that system going to be easy in the long run? And then looking at hosting. So what hosting options are available in your commerce platform? So consider that the fewer parties you can have involved in your commerce, the fewer things you have to connect, the better your predictability, both for your costs, but also for your support. And in B2B, we're often seeing that the best fit at the moment for our customers is having PaaS hosting. It gives them the flexibility that they need. It's able to perform in the most complex scenarios, in those really peak demands, which we quite often get with our B2B customers. So we're finding that that's increasingly the system that our customers achieve, the form of hosting that our customers are choosing. But consider what's available with your commerce platform. What are you going to have to connect? Is it what you actually need, or are you fitting into a box of what's available? And then thinking about your extensions as well. So similarly as with hosting, what's natively available? What has been built to reduce friction, to work most easily with your commerce system? And what might you need to connect? How easy is it to connect that? And similarly to your architecture, what are your extensions? What are your needs going to look like in the future? Are your future needs possibly met by what's natively available, or are you going to have to start connecting things? So just having a look at that is really important when you're choosing your commerce system, but also when you're optimizing your costs. And just for an example of what we mean by an open ecosystem and connectivity and making it easy. So at Shopware, we've got a lot of partners that we work very closely with. And these are things that are built to work with Shopware to make things easy. Those are readily available to you. There's a lot of features that are natively available in Shopware, especially for B2B with our B2B suite. But also there's a huge host of partners that are available that are specialized that can help you and know how to work with Shopware. And then if we look at agentic commerce and AI in practice, so our next webinar, which I believe is on the 9th of April, correct me if I'm wrong, Johanna, is going to look much more deeper into AI and how this manifests in B2B specifically. I think it's Jason presenting, and he'll be talking about the hype, the reality, and what you should actually be doing with AI. So I think that's going to be a really interesting one. But as I mentioned a little bit later, it's not always so much about innovation, but it's more about utilizing the AI tools that are available to reduce the friction in your commerce platform and to reduce the friction that you might have in the commerce journey. So things like automating your day-to-day operations. How can you take the workload off your everyday so that you can spend more time having valuable conversations, having valuable interactions with your customers? But similarly, we spoke about market expansion and how easy it is to expand to new markets. So you can also use it to decrease your project delivery timelines. So maybe you will have seen on Shopware's channels as well that we recently announced Nexus that also helps you do exactly that, reduce your time to market, open new markets quicker. But I will let Jason talk about that a little bit more detail in the next webinar. So if we go on to our ROI checklist. So before we close for today, I want to leave you with some actionable things that you can take away. What can you actually do when you're looking at your commerce system, when you're choosing a new commerce system? So first of all, be clear on the levers that you are going to apply to grow your top line. So are you thinking of launching new countries, activating new marketplaces in those countries? Are you going to introduce specific payment methods to improve the convenience for your buyers? And is your platform that you're choosing giving you the path to make that happen at a predictable cost and a frictionless integration? Is it going to be seamless? Are they ready for it? So are you set up to make the most of your time to market and get that opportunity, make the most of that opportunity as quickly as you can? And then make sure that you have transparency over the overall cost structure and running your B2B commerce operations. So be aware that subscription license is just the top of the iceberg. So it represents around 15 to 20% of your overall total cost of ownership. So exactly as we mentioned with the iceberg, it's not just your license fees, it's the integrations, it's the maintenance, it's the future expansions that you're going to need and what that's going to cost you. So comparison on face value could leave you with surprises. So if you are looking at a new commerce system, just look below the surface and look beyond just the subscription costs and the licensing fees. What is the integration going to be like in time, in cost? Do you need developers? Every time you want to change something, do you need a developer, or is it set up to enable you to be able to do that easily? And then the third point, making sure that the suggested setup minimizes your lock-in and minimizes your limitations. So your critical areas are going to be payments, marketplaces, activation, personalization, things like that. So are you set up to be locked in and be tied into this system? Or again, is that system going to grow with you? Is it going to meet your needs rather than you having to meet the system's needs? And please stress test the platform. So use your most complex use case. What's the peak demand? What's the most complex scenario that your customers might be using your commerce for? And stress test that before, because if you already have an idea of what your worst case scenario looks like, let's say, you can already prepare, you can see any of the gaps that you might have, but also hopefully see that your system is set up to be able to help you deal with those proactively rather than waiting for those peak demands for those complex scenarios to happen, but your commerce failing. So those are 4 things that you can take away with you and can start with already. If you join some of our other webinars, you will already be aware about the Commerce Compass report. You can just scan this QR code here. If you want to download the free white paper, it will give you a bit more information on digital maturity and agentic commerce. And again, that's specifically for the B2B industry. So within that, you can find 6 key actions to help you scale in 2026. In the meantime, as well, I just want to shout out that you might want to have a look back at some of our previous webinars. So some really good topics that link into very nicely some of the things we talked about here today that impact your total cost of ownership, that impact your return on investment, all really useful information you can find in those. So most recently, we had why B2B buyers leave. We had fragmented systems and how to make them into an opportunity, increasing revenue, and what are the buyer expectations in B2B in 2026. So those are ones that you can already have a look back on and have a look back on the recordings. And like I mentioned a little bit earlier, our next webinar is going to be from Jason, who's going to look at AI in B2B commerce. So sifting through the hype from the reality and leaving you with some actions of what you should actually be focusing on AI and not just maybe getting lost in the hype and the trends. So this is all from us today. Thank you very much for joining us. Feel free to reach out on LinkedIn and we can continue the conversation there as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. For now, there are no questions. So to give everyone time back, I'm just going to leave it at that for now. Or, of course, feel free to include your question at this point. Otherwise, thank you very much, Adriana, for the great session and all the valuable insights. As she mentioned, of course, if you have further questions on the topic, feel free to connect with her on LinkedIn. And then I can only say I hope to see you next Thursday for the last session of the B2B Future Forum. And until then, wishing you a great week. And then thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much, guys. Bye.